Hello and welcome to the Avenue Uniting Church in Blackburn, Victoria, meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. My name's Rod Peppiatt and I'm in the ministry here. Today I want to read to you two readings, firstly from the Gospel of Luke and then a contemporary reading of Grace called Loving My Enemies. Firstly, from Luke's Gospel, chapter 6, verses 27 onwards. I say to you who are listening, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to anyone who asks of you. And if anyone takes away what is yours, do not ask for it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you expect to receive payment, what credit is that? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. Instead, love your enemies, do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great and you will be children of the Most High, for He Himself is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. And then a reading called, it's from a book by Amanda Eudes Kessler in the United States called Abundant Lives. The reading I've called Loving My Enemies. Excuse me. Amanda says this: connecting love with a commitment to human well-being offers a possible answer. Not an easy answer, but certainly one that I find more plausible than most of the other answers I've encountered to the question, how am I to love my enemies? I do not need to like my enemies or agree with their perspectives to love them. I do not need to wish them success in their harmful endeavours, and I certainly do not need to support their harmful endeavours. I don't even have to refrain from working against them politically. Loving my enemies requires me to desire and work for their flourishing, just as I desire and work for the flourishing of all other people. I might act lovingly towards my enemies by working for the well-being of all human beings, with the understanding that such work will have a positive effect on my enemies. Love my enemies? But that would mean I'd run out of enemies, wouldn't it? And then who would I blame for stuff? Are you sure about this, Jesus? It's a nice idea, I guess. But it's not how things work in the real world. I wonder, how many of us have heard a sermon or a reflection over the years called, "Who is my neighbour?" Often in connection with the parable of the Good Samaritan. I wonder, how many of us have heard a sermon called, "Who is my enemy?" Not so many, I imagine. I also wonder if we realise just how countercultural that is. Even in a country as free and privileged as Australia, and not just in times of war either. Now, whether we believe it or not is up to us, but we are told constantly that we have enemies. News media, and especially social media, is only too happy to help us find enemies, real and imagined. And we look at world politics, and especially those at the moment of the US, and we see that making an enemy is the political playbook. They're bad people, terrible people, those immigrants. They bring drugs and disease and they murder our people. Or just yesterday, President Trump said of Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky, Zelensky is a dictator with low approval who started the war with Russia. Zelensky's approval rating, by the way, is actually 57%, about the same as Trump's. And Russia invaded Ukraine, not the other way around. It's not a new thing, though. Politicians and leaders have always known that hate is an effective persuasion tool. Hate them. Fear them. You know you want to. Why? Well, because they're not us. Anything else? No, that's it. That's enough. Our political system is a little less broken than the US's, but the signs are there, and we grieve. Where does this all come from? Why am I talking about it today? Well, some of it quite clearly comes from our gospel story today and Jesus' command to love our enemies. Some of it comes from our contemporary reading of grace and Amanda Eudes Kessler's sense of what it might look like to love our enemies. Her idea and her desire to work for the flourishing of her enemies both challenges and inspires me. Some of it comes from trying to decide if I have enemies and whether I'm kidding myself if I say no to that question. I'm still working on that one. And some of it comes from listening to Raph Epstein the other day on ABC Radio here in Melbourne. He asked a really important question in a discussion that had sort of been about the anti-Semitic ramblings and rantings of those two nurses in Sydney, and alongside the Islamophobic attack on two women in Melbourne the day before. Now, people were ringing in to Raph with their views on why it's worse for one side or for the other. And in the midst of that, Raph asked a question something like this: do we really have to take sides? Can we not have enough compassion to care? Excuse me. Can we not have enough compassion to care about violence against both communities? Surely violence against either or both communities diminishes us all. Love our enemies. Or even better, discover they're not our enemies after all. I mentioned Amanda Eudes Kessler, whose book Abundant Lives has been a backdrop for me in this conversation. She used a term there that I'd heard before, but which has had me thinking a lot lately. The term or the word kindom. Kin-dom. Clearly, it's very similar to another word that emerged through the centuries to describe the way of God in the world. Kingdom, more familiar. But for me, kingdom is a much more appropriate way to describe Jesus' vision of God's way than kingdom. And we know that kingdom emerged out of the language of imperial Rome and feudal Europe. We also know that Jesus resisted it on many occasions. More than that, though, kingdom speaks to me of Jesus' conviction of human connection with God and each other. Connection to be characterised by compassion and grace and by liberation from all that diminishes humanity. kingdom finds its echoes in the words of modern prophets like Desmond Tutu, when he said, "My humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together." I think in a statement like that, he is firmly in the way of Jesus of Nazareth. I've given myself some homework as a result of all of this. You might like to join me in it. I asked earlier if I was kidding myself to think I have no enemies, and I suspect I am. There's no one I want to hurt, and I don't know of anyone who wants to hurt me. But there are certainly people I write off or dismiss. Does that count? Can I love them and desire for their flourishing just because they are human beings like me? That's my homework. May your kingdom come, Holy God. Or in the words of the song, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. In the name of the Holy One, in whom we live and move and have our being. Amen.